They surrounded my car with spike strips, all because I dared to grow tomatoes in my own driveway. But what they didn't know was I found a legal loophole the HOA president never saw coming. Tell me, what would you do if your own neighbors tried to trap you just for growing your own food? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. The police officer stood frozen, eyes locked on the sharp metal spike strips circling my car. His brow furrowed in disbelief as he exhaled sharply. "They really did this over vegetables?" he muttered, scratching his head. I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. "Tomatoes, officer. It all started with tomatoes." I gestured toward the row of planters lining my driveway, now a battlefield over basic food. Never in my wildest dreams did I think growing a few vegetables would turn me into a prisoner in my own home. But 3 months ago, everything changed. It all began the day I lost my accounting job. A pink slip arrived in my inbox on a Tuesday, along with my final paycheck. Just enough to scrape by for another few weeks. But after that, nothing. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a $200 grocery bill, a fork in one hand, and a bowl of $7 tomato salad in front of me. $7 for a few slices of tomato? That's when it hit me. I could grow my own food. The very next morning, I drove straight to Home Depot. I loaded up my cart with plastic planters, rich soil, and a variety of vegetable seedlings. My driveway received a perfect 6 hours of sunlight every day. Why waste it? Within a week, I had 2 neat rows of containers lining my driveway, bursting with tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, and fresh herbs. And then, my first harvest came. I ran the numbers. Just that first batch saved me $43 compared to grocery store prices. $43 for something I grew with my own hands. It felt amazing. Each morning, I'd step outside with my coffee, watching little green tomatoes swell into plump, ripe red beauties. And it wasn't just me who loved it. Some neighbors stopped to chat, admiring the setup, even asking for gardening tips. Mr. Garcia, my sweet elderly neighbor, knocked on my door one afternoon with a kind smile. "I had these lying around," he said, handing me a stack of tomato cages. "Figured you could use them." It was nice. It felt like a community. But then the camera click started. Standing on her pristine, golf course perfect lawn, arms crossed, was Patricia Wilson. Her blonde bob sat motionless in the breeze, but her phone? Snapping photo after photo of my driveway. I raised a hand in a friendly wave. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her thin, practiced smile barely shifted. "Just documenting some concerns for community meeting," she said coolly before spinning on her heel and walking away. I should have known right then something bad was coming. That night, a ping echoed from my phone. New email from Richard Thompson. Subject, HOA violation notice. I opened it. My stomach dropped. "Attention homeowner at 476 Oakwood Drive. Our community maintains strict aesthetic standards as outlined in the HOA guidelines. Your current driveway setup violates code 15-3 and must be remedied within 7 days. 7 days? For what? I immediately grabbed the HOA handbook, flipping through all 43 pages, twice. Not a single word about banning container gardens. The only thing remotely close? A rule about keeping driveways clear of long-term storage items. But these weren't storage items. They were actively growing plants. I wasn't cluttering my driveway. I was feeding myself. The next morning, I stepped outside and spotted a small handwritten note taped to my mailbox. Gardens belong in backyards, not where everyone has to see them. Concerned neighbor. I didn't need to guess who wrote it. The handwriting was identical to the Christmas card Patricia sent me last year. And as I carried my trash out later that afternoon, I saw her standing on the corner, talking to Richard. They both glanced toward my house. Richard pointed. Patricia nodded eagerly. Then, like clockwork, 3 days later, a formal letter arrived. This time, they weren't asking nicely. Your agricultural activities are inconsistent with the community's residential character. Failure to comply will result in a $100 daily fine. $100 a day. I grabbed a calculator. My savings had already been stretched to the limit. This would break me. That night, I refused to sleep. I stayed up until 2 a.m. researching HOA laws, scouring every legal document I could find. That's when I discovered something they didn't expect. HOAs can enforce reasonable restrictions, but they couldn't blatantly overreach. I printed out the county's definition of landscaping. And guess what? Container gardens were specifically allowed. Armed with evidence, I walked the neighborhood the next morning and started taking photos. Holiday decorations? Still up in April. Unapproved lawn ornaments? Everywhere. Basketball hoops? HOA violations. But guess what? No fines. No warnings. The only thing they cared about? My tomatoes. I sat down at my desk and started typing. Dear Richard, attached, you'll find a copy of the county's official stance on container gardens, as well as photographic evidence of numerous other infractions that have gone completely ignored. Selective enforcement of HOA policies is a legal issue. I request a formal response. Sincerely, me. Before I hit send, I knocked on Mr. Garcia's door. They're targeting you, he said, shaking his head, because Patricia wants to win the Neighborhood Beautification Award next month. I blinked. What? He took a sip of coffee. Her view includes your driveway. She's been complaining to anyone who'll listen. I clenched my fists. All this over stupid award. Garcia nodded, and Richard always takes her side. Her husband's his golf buddy. But then Garcia leaned forward and lowered his voice. They ran the Johnsons out last year. Their daughter needed a wheelchair ramp, but they got fined for it being the wrong shade of beige. This wasn't just about me. I clicked send, and that was the moment I declared war. I'll continue with the next part if you're happy with this. Let me know your thoughts. Smiling face with smiling eyes.